What is up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Dense Pixels podcast. I'm your host, Brad, joined by my co-host, Carrie.
What's up?
We will be without Micah for a couple of weeks, but we will hopefully see him back very soon. We also took last week off because I am now officially an old man, and my body picked a really cruel time to be like, hey, we're just going to give you acute lower back pain across the entire weekend. This past weekend, so
yeah, right.
It's also, I mean, it has not been like my first week in my 40s. Has not been great. The Orioles barely showed up to the MLB postseason.
Yo, that team limped into the playoffs and then promptly limped right.
You know,
back
we did win 5 of 6 going into the playoffs. I just want to point out for the record against the Yankees and the Twins, who technically were still playoff eligible when we started that series against them.
Yeah,
and then proceeded to score all of 1 run in the 2 games against Kansas City, while only giving up 3. Like, that's the thing that killed me, is that we got fantastic pitching, and we just could not hit to save our life. Tottenham Hotspur blew a sure game. They had a 2-0 lead at halftime, lost 3-2 this weekend, and the cap season starts on Sunday, which is not as exciting as you think it does, because I'm pretty sure the Capitals are not going to be very good this year. So
no,
it's it is a time.
I hope the Caps at least fall into the fun but not good territory.
My like I said, my ideal way that this year unfolds is that the team at least is competitive and is on the bubble for most of the season, and that Ovechkin gets the goals record this year, so that we don't have to continue to worry about that after this season. That would be my ideal. So, but fortunately, the video games are good right now. And let's get it kicked off. So the review scores came out today for Metaphor ReFantazio, which is coming out on Friday. The new game the new JRPG coming from Atlas, which it feels reductive to call it fantasy Persona, but I have played the demo that's out, and there is a demo that's out now, and the progress from the demo does carry over into the main game. And the demo basically takes you through the first dungeon. Unlike in like Persona 5, which is going to be my touchstone for the series, the first dungeon is not like super long. Like, it really is just a tutorial dungeon that is the length that you expect it to be. But not to be reductive, but it really just is fantasy Persona. Like it has all the trappings of the Persona games, just done in this. It's not a generic fantasy setting, but it certainly is a fantasy.
You would call it
setting.
High fantasy, right?
High.
It's a high fantasy setting. Look, I'm very excited to play Metaphor. I haven't had a chance to play the demo, which sucks because I really want to. Is there still time to do it before it comes out?
Oh yeah, no, the demo's still available,
right.
and you can still play it in the progress or carry
Maybe I'll
over.
do that sometime over the next couple of days.
I will say, I am kind of excited for the combat in the game. So the big difference between like a Persona game or SMT and this one is that instead of having the different personas, you have what they're calling archetypes, which are a fancy word to say classes. And that determines what what spells or abilities you have available to you, and kind of caters the playstyle. The big difference is that you can change the archetypes on any character, not just the main character, but also any of your support characters as well. So you have a lot more customization over the entire makeup of your party in this one. They also do the thing in this game that really more JRPGs need to do. So, in Persona 5, like, you could sneak up to an enemy on the regular map that you're on, the traversal map, and hit them to get an advantage going into battle. They've kind of expanded on that mechanic in this one, where you can actually do like multiple strikes on that enemy, and if you strike them multiple times, it will deal like a big blow going into the battle, give you a huge advantage. Obviously, if the enemy hits you, it'll put them at advantage, or you can just initiate a regular battle from that overworld to kind of keep things neutral. But now if there are enemies that are below your party's strength, like significantly below where fighting them would be a waste of time, you can actually just kill them on the overworld map and not even have to get into a combat encounter as well.
That was something you could do in Persona 5,
Hmm.
once you ranked things up to a certain point, I think with Ghana. That was it basically like it unlocked after a certain
Yeah.
point in P5. It was something I wish was in P3 and wasn't. But yeah, it's definitely one of those like little sort of quality of life things of just like this battle would be a complete waste of time, so we're just going to say that you did it.
Hmm.
Yeah. I've heard metaphor referred to as basically like Persona with a job system.
Hmm. Yes,
So
that's accurate so far from my experience. So
yeah, really looking forward to playing it. This is the basically the you would call it a debut new studio title from Studio Zero. Studio Zero formed in 2016 by Katsuro Hashino, who is the Persona series director, alongside Shoji Meguro and Shigenori Sojima, who is basically your sort of core three creative driving force for Personas 3 through 5, especially. Um, so, it is not a Shin Megami Tensei title. Brad and I were discussing this shortly before the show. But this feels like, a persona-like experience, in a way that I'm very much looking forward to exploring, sort of outside of the larger umbrella of the Megaten franchise.
yeah.
So,
Put
um,
it this way: if you like the Persona or SMT games, this is going to be exactly what you're expecting, just with a new chance to tell a different story. From all the reports, the story really does a good job leaning into like politics and religion and things like that. That's kind of expressed in the demo as well, because the main character, which is voiced for the first time that I can recall in one of these, is kind of thought like a bad omens of sorts in the world that they have created here. So it's interesting to see how different characters that you've encountered react to them, to that main character as you go through the game. And they have some room to tell a compelling story. They already have they've introduced like the main villain of the game, who seems like a guy you'll enjoy to hate so far. So looking forward to it. Like I said, I'm very excited for this. It's a good 1-2 punch. The Diablo Vessel of Hatred expansion comes out tomorrow. So I know what I'm going to be playing for basically the next month. But those games are very different from each other, so they'll be a nice counter to one another for me as I go through and check that out. So looking forward to Metaphor ReFantazio. And I'm interested to hear Carrie's thoughts once she plays it. I'm sure we'll have a lot more to say next week once the game is actually out proper.
yep.
You put on the docket talking about Monster Hunter Stories, which I feel like you've talked about on the
I
show
talked about
before.
Monster Hunter Stories 2, and Monster Hunter Stories 2 came out in what was that? 2021,
Mm-hmm.
22. Um but the first game, yeah, so Monster Hunter Stories 2 came out in summer 2021, and I enjoyed that game quite a bit. Now, I had not played the previous Monster Hunter Stories, which was a very, very, very late 3DS release.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Monster Hunter Stories came out about 6 months after, at least in the United States, about 6 months after the release of the Switch. So this was like sneaking in at the 11th hour in terms of the 3DS's life cycle. But it's good. They did a remake um on Switch and PS4. Doesn't need to be a PS5 title because it's not especially graphically demanding. As well as on Steam. And yeah, it's really good. It's very much it's so while the main Monster Hunter games are action adventure titles, right? Um, the two Monster Hunter Stories games are turn-based RPGs,
Mm-hmm.
with a monster sort of collecting dynamic. So you are not a hunter, you are what's called a rider, and you form bonds with monsters, rather than hunt them for sports, in order to, sort of solve problems going on. there's a real sort of literal like a rock paper scissors dynamic, where you can do a power attack, you can do a speed attack, or you can do a technical attack. So power beats technical, technical beats speed, speed beats power. Um, and then there are other like elemental weaknesses that come into play and different weapon types and whatnot. So like some monsters are more weak to slash attacks, some are more weak to blunt attacks versus pierce attacks, stuff like that. Um, Basically the whole story is like there's a blight and it's bad and it's affecting the monsters and making them go kind of crazy. So you're kind of investigating what's going on with that. Having played two first, it's interesting to see how many like characters that are story important
Mhm.
show up in both games. So in
Are they
hindsight, I
intended to
would
be like like a direct sequel to one
it's
another?
not really a direct sequel, you know, I never felt playing 2 like I was missing out on anything for not having played 1 because they're completely different stories, but a bunch of characters end up being party members in both adventures. It's just they're like 5 or 6 years older in the events of 2, and it almost feels like more of a sort of like reward for having played the first game that like, oh, this is what they're up to now.
Mhm.
Um so it's nice to sort of get back to the realm of Monster Hunter through this remake of Stories. It was on sale. I bought it on Switch because I had a flight coming up and it was a few bucks off, so I got it for with my Switch points that I had too. I think I only paid like 22 bucks for it. And yeah, I mean, they're really fun, they're very charming, the music is good. It runs great on the Switch, so I imagine it runs that much better on PS4 um and Steam. But I mean, that being said, I haven't really had any issues with the Switch like chugging at all, even when you're on this sort of like, you know, open world kind of area map with a lot of like creatures moving around on it, not having the kind of like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet issue of bad draw distances or anything like that. Um, yeah, it's a lot of fun. I felt sort of the same way when I was playing Stories 2, which was like, wow, this is like a really good like Pokemon like or your sort of Monster Hunter or monster collecting JRPG turn-based experience. Um but it feels like it's going very much overlooked. So yeah, I mean, they're they're very inexpensive. I
Mhm.
didn't realize that when they did the remake of 1, you can now get like a double pack of stories 1 and 2 for Switch, PS4, and Steam that contains both games for 50 bucks, which seems like an insane deal for a pair of like very good um turn-based RPGs. So, yeah, I bought it basically to play on the plane. I was out east for like 2.5 days this weekend for a wedding, and yeah, I played like 7 or 8 hours of
Mhm.
that game just on the plane ride. So they're not especially long games. I think at most they're probably like 30 to 40 hour experiences. So I'm just gonna try and crunch my way through that over the next few days now that I'm finally past all of how busy I have been for the last couple of months. So,
It's interesting that they went with like an RPG spinoff for the Monster Hunter series because like
mhm,
for me like that game is purely mechanics driven. Like I don't really
mhm.
care about the lore all that much. Like it's just like, oh, see monster, go kill, craft weapon, make bigger hammer, like that sort of stuff. So
Yeah, I mean the plots of the mainline games feel very loose.
mhm.
Um, so I mean, in that sense, it's kind of nice that they decided to go with a very like character-driven, story-driven, single-player RPG experience with this spin-off series by comparison. So
Yeah, very cool. Let's
yeah.
take a quick break, and then when we come back, there's a couple more games we've been playing that we will talk about. So last time we were on, I talked about UFO 50, which had just come out, which is of course a collection of 50 new NES style games from Derek Yu and John Perry. Derek Yu, of course, the creator of the Splunky games.
Mhm.
And I kind of tempered my recommendation, saying that I feel like it's gonna be very appealing to people of a specific age or game genre enjoyer. But there's some really interesting ideas going on with it if you wanted to embrace it. And it's now been 2 weeks, and I played a lot more UFO 50, and I need to adjust my recommendation that everyone should be playing UFO 50, because now that I'm through just kind of seeing kind of like the 10-minute version of each game, essentially just kind of getting to know each game, and I've actually gotten to spend some time with some of the games that I found particularly interesting from the jump. There is some really smart and just really appealing game design ideas that are being used in these games. It is really interesting. Like what I said last week, that it felt like someone went into a time machine with the game design knowledge of today and made new 8-bit games. Like that's really what it is. And it's interesting to see games using new ideas or contemporary ideas that are forced into a box of simple mechanics and controls, because it's by its own design, it is very limited. Like it literally has like the cross D-pad and 2-button control scheme for every single game, essentially, and that's all they avail themselves with. So they have to make each game work in that framework. And some of these games that are here, if they like if you sold them kind of like you would like the Genesis collection games, where like you buy them really cheap for like $3 a piece, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
they would be like they would be awesome in that kind of digestible form. So getting 50 of them for, what is it, $25, I think it is insane to me. And this is UFO 50 is kind of shot up now as it's probably it's almost certainly going to be in my top 10 games of the year. It's probably going to be my top 5. It might even end up in my top 3. Like that's how much I'm enjoying a lot of what's going on. And I really think that this game deserves to be, or this collection of games I should say, deserves to be in like game of the year discussions. And I know it's going to really piss me off when it's not, or you might see it on like individual podcast game of the years and stuff like that, but it's not going to get recognized, I don't think, at like the Game Awards or something like that.
Right.
And it really should, because even like it's one thing to like try to do something this ambitious, make 50 brand new games and release them as part of this collection, and it's another thing to like achieve it in and even the games that that haven't particularly jived with me, like I can recognize that even though they're not for me, like they're of high quality and they will be really appealing to somebody else. Also so far, like, and to kind of also demonstrate like how much value this package gives you, so I put like 16 hours in so far to UFO 50 as a whole, right? I've beaten 2 of the games out of the 50 on there, and beating the game kind of turns the cartridge, gold on the selection screen.
Sure.
But there's more than that. Like every game's like, oh, you want to beat the game, like cool, we'll give you gold cartridge. But if you want to master the game, we'll give you the cherry cartridge. And so every game has like a extra, like, yeah, you could beat it, but if you beat it this way, like we'll give you even more recognition. And I haven't done that to any of them yet. And so there's a lot to dive into. Like it's easily dozens of hours of gameplay if you want to explore everything that's on this package. A couple people have asked me privately, like, what are my favorite games so far in this collection. I have a list. I meant to do a list of 5, and that became 10, and that became 11 because I couldn't knock one off. So real quick, my top 11 UFO 50 games. So there's Mortal, which is a puzzle platform game. That's very interesting. Avianos, which is a strategy game it's like an area control game with dinosaurs. Bushido Ball, which is samurai dodgeball, essentially. That's very good. Warp Tank, another puzzle platformer where you can manipulate gravity and shoot off from one side of the stage to the other. Onion Delivery, which, to be reductive, is a top-down version of Crazy Taxi, essentially.
Okay.
Party House, which is a deck building game all about crafting the ultimate house party and not being so obnoxious that the cops come. Uh, Pin Golf, which is pinball golf. It's a 2D, a side-scrolling pinball golf game, which is it's the game I've been the most obsessed with out of any of the collections. Excellent. Grimstone, which is what if Dragon Quest had a Wild West theme associated with it. There's a whole ass Dragon Quest RPG in this collection. Lords of Disconia, which is like a flicking battling game with discs that you can kind of flick around like a billiard style game. Pilot Quest, which is like, what if you took an idle game and like a clicker game and combined it with Toe Jam and Earl? That's the second most game that I've been playing in this collection. And then finally, Quibble Race, which is like betting on horse racing, except there are these little like these little worms that you're betting on. Also, you can fuck with them and be corrupt as shit in manipulating how the races pan out. So that's my top 11. And again, that's 11 out of 50 games that it's in this collection. So again, if you have a PC or Steam Deck, I would strongly urge you to check out UFO 50. I don't know why this game isn't on any other platform but PC yet. Like, that seems like a huge miss in my eyes at the very least. This is like tailor-made for Nintendo Switch. Like it's crazy to me that it's not on there yet. I'm sure it'll be there eventually. But yeah, this is one of the best games of the year in my estimation. And I'll be curious to see where it lands on my top list when we do Game of the Year in just a couple months' time.
Well then, something for me to eventually check out
Yeah.
because I have so many things coming out right now and so many things to finish.
But the great thing about this is like this is a great like pick up and play for 20 minutes game. Like
Okay.
you can sit there
Yeah.
for hours, or you can just like, all right, I'm gonna play a couple rounds of pin golf, or I'm gonna do some click like the thing about the Planet Quest, which is the clicker game, is that it's an idle game, right? So like it runs while you're playing other UFO 50 games. So like it's one of those ones that like you go play other stuff and you come back and you check in on it and do all that stuff. And it's so like it gives you the Skinner box of like the clicker games, but without the predatory nature that most that most clicker games also give you as well.
That's sick. So about a month ago now, the big piece of story DLC for Persona 3 Reload called Episode Aegis came out, so I got that. And this is a remake of the epilogue chapter, which was originally released for the original Persona 3 as part of Persona 3 FES. So I never finished the answer when I first played Persona 3 FES about 14, 16 years ago. And the reason for that is because it wasn't fun. Because the answer, story-wise, it takes place after the events of Vanilla P3, right? So at the very end of the story, you defeat the embodiment of despair and death, and then like the protagonist appears to fall asleep, and that's kind of the end of the game. And then the answer picks up and the protagonist has passed away, and it's the last day at the dorm that you shared with all of your party members. And basically, as the night is winding down, like a mysterious door opens that goes underneath the dorm, and another shadow fighting humanoid robot, very similar to Aegis, called Metis, appears. And basically, the party realizes very quickly that they are now stuck in a time loop. It's like March 31st or something like that. And the thing about the answer in FES is that it was just really grindy. You're basically like delving down into the abyss of time, and there's some additional story content, but it's mostly just like Tartarus now goes down instead of up, and there's just like a million floors for you to get through. And I remember not really like caring for it that much, just because of the fact that like big reason why I like Persona games is for the story and the characters and whatnot. And there wasn't a ton of story going on. So for episode Aegis, the version that they did for Reload, it's still mostly a grind. Like, you're still stuck in the dorm. There's still not really anything to do besides like continue to do dungeon diving. But, you know, you can return to the dorm at any time to sort of like reset and whatnot and upgrade your gear and so on and so forth. And when you're back at the dorm, you can have these additional little like vignettes with the other members of C's. So there's a bit of expansion on like the individual characters and like how they interact with each other and what they're reminiscing on and you know that sort of thing. And that's nice because there's like the social links are still gone. Like you're basically just controlling Aegis and just fighting shadows until you're done. Um the new battle theme is nice. That's a lot of fun. Um that being said, it's still basically just the answer, so it's still basically just like grindy turn-based JRPG stuff. So I'm finding it a challenge to basically like get myself psyched up to play it or get myself in the mood to do it, knowing that it's basically just going to be like really grindy stuff and not a lot of like story stuff.
Seems very that seems a very like of its time sort of
Yeah,
like challenge for JRPGs
it
like
is.
around the time when P3 came out, like that's what JRPGs did, is that like, oh, like what if we do like 100 floor like challenge dungeon for you, and it's just going to be battle after
Yep,
battle after battle, and there'll be a big nasty boss at the end, and when you're done you'll get like a cool weapon that
yep.
probably would have been a lot more useful if you could have gotten it before you did the hardest thing that you could do in the game.
Yeah. That's basically it. I will say that at least the different sort of areas of the Abyss of Time like look a lot nicer now, so like it is at least slightly more visually stimulating in that respect. But yeah, I mean, I would say I'm about let's say a third of the way through it at this point. I'm not really allowing myself to get fully into metaphor. Like I'm not gonna play the full game until after I finish episode Aegis.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know if I start playing metaphor, I'm never gonna finish episode Aegis. So I know I need to do that. But again, fortunately, I am now past a extended run of just being very busy. Like for reference, if you're listening to this, it is currently October 7th, 2K24. And I have every weekend except for one since July 27th had either like a social obligation, like a wedding or something like that, or a gig every weekend. I have flown cross country and back twice in that time. Um, I've played something like five or six shows in that time. Between buy score and like filling in with another friend's band, I recorded 3 tracks for a new Hades EP with my band Premium Vintage. Um, I'm tired, but I also haven't had a ton of time to just like sit and rot and play video games. So I'm really looking forward to some like high quality rot time. So I'm sure once I like actually like fully settle back in and don't feel like I have to do anything else related to gigs or seeing other humans in real life, I will get episode Aegis done and then it's right into metaphor for me.
Yeah, and again, Dragon Age coming out too at the end of this month, so it's we're right in the thick of it. We're right in the thick of the
Look,
release
I
season.
already know it's like I'm probably not even going to end up buying Dragon Age until it hits a sale just
Mm-hmm.
because of the fact that it's like I'm not going to buy it day one only to just not play it. So chances are I will end up picking up Veilguard, um, once it hits the inevitable EA, it's $30 off. Happy Christmas
You'll probably get at
sale.
least a $20 discount for Christmas, I would imagine. So
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
yeah.
So I'll pick it up then. I'm genuinely looking forward more to picking up Sonic and Shadow Generations at the end of the month. That's in 2 weeks. Just because I know that like the Sonic games are very easy because they're stage based, where it's like, cool, I can clear 2 or 3 stages and then go do something else. Like it's a little more like pick up and play for short bursts than the kind of JRPGs that I tend to sink a million billion hours
Yeah.
into. So
That's gonna be the hard part for me, is because all I've been playing lately is kind of like pick up and play stuff that you can just play 20 minutes or play 2 hours, and that's fine. Like getting into Diablo grinding and Metaphor, like long, like you're probably playing for 2 or 3 hours at a clip sessions, is
yeah.
going to be very strange for me with what I've been doing here lately. So let's take another break, and then we'll be back with the news. So, Carrie, Ubisoft has had themselves a couple of weeks here.
They sure have.
They're in a weird state right now, just as a company. So they, a couple weeks ago, there was some scuttlebutt around the industry because a planned preview event for Assassin's Creed Shadows had been delayed. And in the past, when Ubisoft has done this, it is kind of like a harbinger of a delay in the game itself. And people were kind of surprised about this because, of course, Assassin's Creed Shadows is supposed to be their big holiday release this year. But that is indeed what happened. They have pushed Assassin's Creed back to February of 2025, which, by the way, it is going to be releasing in the middle of the new Monster Hunter game and the new Civilization game, and I'm sure a bunch of other games, because February is the new October in the gaming industry nowadays. So good job by them.
It really is. Like, why?
Yeah.
Why? When did that happen?
It's been happening for the past couple of years when enough games like realized that they wanted to get out of the way of the big holiday games coming out. Yeah, and February became the new kind of landing spot for a lot of those games. I mean, Capcom has been feasting in the January, February, March timeframe for the past several years. So, but Assassin's Creed is now joining that mix. They said that they have pushed the game back. The game is feature complete. But the company, considering the, quote, softer than expected reception of the recent Star Wars Outlaws, had compelled them to want to polish the game even more. Internal leakings from Ubisoft said that actually Shadows might have been in worse shape than they are acknowledging, as far as just an overall polish standpoint. So kind of, and apparently they had been begging to delay the game for several months, knowing that it was probably not going to be able to hit that timetable. And as a result of this, Ubisoft shares, because Ubisoft is a publicly traded company, their shares dropped pretty majorly in the wake of this announcement. And people also looked historically at Ubisoft's share price, and at the peak of where they were in the marketplace, Ubisoft was trading at about $100 a share.
Yeah.
And that stock price is down to about $10 a share now, which is a big fucking problem for a company that employs somewhere close to 20,000 people. People don't realize Ubisoft is as big as it is, but it is the biggest third-party publisher that's out there, I think, at this point, especially with Activision Blizzard coming off the market. And I don't even know that they were close to that anyway. But they're bigger than EA. They're bigger than.
Well, apparently EA has worldwide somewhere across somewhere in the realm of about 30,000.
Oh, is that so? Okay.
Yeah. So EA's still a little bit bigger, but obviously, Ubisoft is right up there. So.
Yeah. And things are so bad that reportedly Ubisoft is in discussions with Tencent to possibly have Tencent buy the company out and take it back private again, to stabilize it and to bolster its value. And this is being spearheaded by the Guillemot brothers, who are the ones that have run Ubisoft since its conception.
Hmm.
And this sure seems to me like this is like Yves Guillemot and his family's ploy to remain in charge of the company. Because I would imagine that if Ubisoft remained publicly traded, that their board would probably be expecting them to get the fuck out based on what we've seen from Ubisoft over the past several months. You are a bit more versed in finance stuff than I am. So, what is your take on all of this that we're seeing from them?
Gotta access that part of my brain real quick.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's interesting. I do this does sort of feel like a move for, the Guillemot family to basically remain in control of Ubisoft, because given how far that those stocks have come down, usually the move is to replace leadership at that point, to find someone new to take the company in a more sustainably uh fiscally positive direction, right? So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I can't recall off the top of my head another company that like went public, had stocks and shareholders and whatnot, and then went back private.
I can. It's called
Oh,
Twitter.
well, no, I meant gaming
Oh,
company.
gaming. I can't
Yeah,
think of one either. But
yeah.
if the first example that pops to mind is
Is
Twitter, and
Twitter,
we
yeah.
see how that's doing right now, I don't think that
Bad.
bodes well. Yeah.
That being said, I will sink with that ship because I was there first. But yeah, one, if this is basically like, look, Shadows really needs a few more months in the oven to really make sure that the game is polished when it comes out, that's great. The whole deal with Star Wars Outlaws, I feel, has less to do with Ubisoft and more with just general public opinion regarding Star Wars, following how mediocre the sequel trilogy ended up being. I feel like ultimately that's more Disney's fault than
Mhm.
Ubisoft's fault. Um, I really want to play Outlaws. It's just, again, I haven't had time, and at this point I'm just sort of waiting on a good sale.
I
But
think
like
what you
I
just
think
said there is important though, because I
Mhm.
think we talk about it all the time, and I think Ubisoft has built in this ebb and flow of their game releases
Mhm.
where a lot of people don't buy this game at or don't buy their games at full price
No, because
because
Ubisoft.
yeah, they heavily discount like 3 or 4 months after the game
Mhm.
releases, and their games lately have been releasing in a rough around the edges state, let's say. Like
Sure.
as far,
Yeah.
shit. Like Ubisoft, arguably one of the most famous poor bug releases in history with Assassin's Creed Unity 10 years ago, and they haven't really
Yeah.
done much better. I think that this was always coming, and I do think that that the Guillemot brothers probably are not the right stewards for Ubisoft, because I don't think that it seems like Ubisoft, more than most of the other big publishers, has been trend chasing more than anybody over the past several years, because we've basically seen like it's a meme at this point in the industry, like a Ubisoft open world game, right? Like like all
Right.
of their games are the same, just with different themes pasted on.
Right. It's like, a big reason, like, in addition to the fact that, like, I have too much else going on, and ultimately I feel like Star Wars as a brand is not as strong as it was when Ubisoft probably got the license to make this game. Um, it's the idea that, like, when it's an Ubisoft open world game, like, for better and for worse, you know what you're gonna get.
Hmm.
You know what the size of the map is going to be. You know how the characters are going to control. You know that there's going to be X amount of certain types of collectibles for you to get around the map in order to platinum the game, right? So when all of the games start to feel like each other across very different franchises like Assassin's Creed and Star Wars, then, where's the incentive for me to get something day one with any kind of
Mm-hmm.
Ubisoft game, right? So I'm not a Assassin's Creed fan by any stretch of the imagination, but I remember when those games felt kind of fresh and new when I was in undergrad, 15 years ago. Um, but when was the last time that an Assassin's Creed game felt like truly fresh and innovative and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot? At best, they have simply been improving the formula. They haven't really been going in any kind of new direction with that franchise. And sometimes franchise don't need to go into new directions. But when you're introducing, like, here's a big licensed property like Star Wars, and we're just going to have it be basically like every other Ubisoft open
Mm-hmm.
world game, like Far Cry and Assassin's Creed, right? I have to wonder if Outlaws would have had a bigger impact had they gone in a very different direction with it. But also, they were probably awarded the license for that game because of their formula too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
it's
and also too, like Assassin's Creed has been the most dependable of their
mhm,
franchises. Far Cry 3 was a huge game when that came out, and then the lesson that they learned from that is, well, let's just make Far Cry 3 over and over again. And so 4,
mhm,
5, and 6 were the same. They kind of copy pasted Ghost Recon onto that same
yep,
open world formula when that's not what Ghost Recon games were, and it's not necessarily what Ghost Recon fans wanted. And then they try, and again, like I talk about trend chasing. Like, remember, like they were the first ones that dove headfirst into NFTs. They had a Ghost Recon Battle Royale game that was finished that they didn't release and they scrapped because it just wasn't very good. But they wanted a Battle Royale game. They took Rainbow Six and were just like, hey, let's just take Rainbow Six and make an extraction shooter because Tarkov is really popular right now. And that was fucking terrible because again, they just keep trying to say, hey, what's popular in the industry right now? Let's make a Ubisoft version of that.
yep.
And they're doing it not to make good games, but just to make money. And we've seen it with so many other companies time and time again. And meanwhile, the stuff that is innovative that they're doing potentially, Beyond Good and Evil 2 is a joke now. It recently overtook
It's
Duke
been a
Nukem.
joke for years.
Yeah,
It's
well,
been a
I
joke
was
for
saying it
years.
recently overtook
But
Duke
yeah,
Nukem Forever as the game longest in active development in
yep,
history.
yep.
And even when and even the smart things they've done, like partner with Nintendo with Mario and Rabbids, just
Mhm.
didn't bear fruit. And part of that was because I guess Nintendo didn't market it in a way that was effective, or figure out the audience for that. But
It is kind of like, for as good, just quick aside, for as good as the Mario and Rabbids games are, like, what is the audience for
right,
those games? Like, where is the intersection for Super Mario, the fucking Rabbids, which I feel
and
like,
XCOM,
and XCOM, right?
right?
Like, I like 2 out of the 3 of those things. I really like Nintendo characters and XCOM, but I don't fucking like the Rabbids at all, and their inclusion literally makes me wanna play those games less, for as good as they are. Because I have played the first one. I played, like, I wanna say I got, like, 75% of the way through the first one. I got distracted, but I did really like what I played. I should finish that at some point, but it's been, like, 5 years. But it is just one of these things where it's like, that was an interesting partnership, and I feel like could have gone interesting places had it not been for the inclusion of the Rabbids
Mm-hmm.
specifically. Because it's like you're trying to appeal to kids, primarily kids and families, with the characters and the way that everything's designed, but then you're doing like really high level XCOM style
Mm-hmm.
tactical gameplay, which no 6-year-old is going to fucking enjoy. So it weird. That was a
Yeah.
weird one.
It just,
Continues to
like I
be a
said,
weird one.
it just feels like they're trying to capture every audience they can with every game that comes out. And of course, like
Mhm.
when you try to make something that's appealing to everybody, you end up appealing to nobody. Where arguably their most successful like continuing game is a hard as balls tactical first person shooter that has a niche following but
Hmm.
it's still doing pretty well because it's designed and catered to the audience that wants that style of game. Like they're not trying to get Call of Duty players or Halo players to play Rainbow Six Siege. Like they're just making and when they've tried to step outside those bounds, the fan base has been like, "Don't do that," and they're just like, "Oh, let's not do that because we don't want to fuck up." The only thing that's going really well for us. So I think if the Gimos do stay in charge, I think it would behoove them to kind of take a step back to look at what companies like Capcom are doing and companies that have been successful in making new franchises or taking existing franchises and making them feel new again and finding ways to kind of do that. They started to kind of get there with Assassin's Creed by releasing like Mirage, which was perfectly good and it was like the old school Assassin's
Yeah.
Creed games. But again, like when you also have like five other Assassin's Creed projects in development, I feel like you also risk oversaturating the marketplace for that as well. So they're in a weird spot right now. It's gonna be curious to see what happens with the leadership of the company, what happens with the stock, whether it gets bought by Tencent, whether it still remains
Hmm.
publicly traded. I guess the shareholders, as long as they get theirs, aren't going to be too put off by it at the end of the day. They'll be probably happy to be rid of an asset that's depreciating in value right now. But I really hope Ubisoft does take the time to, you know, kind of reevaluate how they are as a publisher. My only fear is that doing that is going to come with massive layoffs of thousands of people. Because
Yep.
usually when companies are in these sort of situations, the first thing that they do is they get smaller because then that's less overhead costs. So
Yep.
Microsoft put out a pretty big video today about the future of the Halo franchise that has fans pretty excited. So they first announced that ever since they had mass layoffs at 343 Industries, who are the Halo developers, they have decided to kind of reset Halo in a way. So they've renamed that studio to what is it called now? Halo
Halo
Studios. Yeah,
Studios.
it's called
Yeah.
Halo Studios now. I think 343 as a brand had a little bit of taint on it in among the Halo fan base because of the last couple Halo releases
Yeah.
that have come out. So they're renaming that. They've also decided to stop using their in-house slipspace engine, which was created from the ground up for Halo Infinite, and they will instead shift over to Unreal Engine 5 for all of their future games. And they have announced that they have several Halo projects in development, including an internal effort called Project Foundry, which will build a foundation for training and best practices for developing Halo with new Unreal Engine 5 tech. Essentially, it seems like they want to kind of get back to the spirit of what Halo was,
Yeah.
which I think is a good thing. I think that franchise has lost its way a little bit, at least from a from a perception standpoint in the industry.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So I'm happy for the Halo fans that hopefully they will have something new to kind of glom onto. And for PlayStation and PC, or well, not for PC players, but for PlayStation players, they'll get to see Master Chief for the first time because I don't see a world where Halo is going to remain locked to the Xbox walled garden in this new Microsoft that we have
No.
today.
No, I don't see it happening. But yeah, look, I much like Assassin's Creed, I am not a Halo fan by any stretch of the
Yeah.
imagination either. But Halo's a franchise that I've always had a lot of respect for. Because at least up until more recently, it seemed like it had like a vision for like what it is, what it does well, what it doesn't want to do, stuff like that. And the sort of muddled release of Infinite felt very off by comparison
Hmm.
when compared to previous releases. So good news for Halo fans,
Yeah.
which I know are many, many, many in number. So
Yeah. Final bit of news: California passed a new state law that will forbid
yay!
digital storefronts from using terms like "buy" unless customers are explicitly warned that they are paying for the license to a game that can expire at any time, and not actually buying ownership of the game itself. I think this is long overdue. Something that kind of should have been, honestly, that the game company should have been more forthright with themselves and not being forced to do it. And instead, they've been burying this knowledge inside terms of services that you have to be a fucking lawyer to actually understand. If you even bother to read through them, because who the fuck does? Because
Right.
I'm not reading raw text. So good on good on the state of California for passing this law to just to provide transparency to buyers.
Something that I've realized after living out here for almost a year now is the fact that this state tends to lead the charge on a lot of consumer protection kind of bills and whatnot that end up having a ripple effect throughout the
Mm-hmm.
entire United States and whatnot. Things like cookies online and this sort of thing and all of that. So I know there's also many AI related bills that are landing at Newsom's desk as of late as well. So no, I'm very very glad for this. Again, as you said, long overdue, and this could have been completely avoided had the companies themselves decided to be upfront and honest with their customers. But why would they do that? Why would
Yeah.
they have ever done that?
Easier to obfuscate that through ever-changing legal requirements that you're forced to agree to play something. So, yeah.
Exactly.
We're going to take one last break, and then we will return with the Dense Pixels post office. All right. As we tell you every week on the show, if you're not a member of our Discord, you can join by going to densepixels.com/fans, so that you can ask us questions that we'll answer on the show every week, just like Johnny did. Now, so WWE Bad Blood was this past weekend. It was an excellent show. By the way, it's not a coincidence to me that when as soon as WWE like switched to, instead of having like 10 match premium live events that lasted like 4.5 hours long, like once they switched the formula, like, hey, we're gonna do 6 matches, and they're all gonna be able to be a bit longer matches, and we're gonna keep it a tight 3.5 hours. All of a sudden, all their pay-per-views all get high marks all the time. Like every pay-per-view they put out over the last year or so has been good. And the main event was the return of Roman Reigns teaming with Cody Rhodes against the New Bloodline. So Johnny says Cody runs to Atlanta when he needs a few dollars, but is he a colleague or is he a fucking colonizer? Now, I did not understand this at all. I knew it was a rap reference. I am very white. So I had to turn to other folks in the network to understand the question that Johnny is asking here. This apparently has to do with like Kendrick Lamar or some shit. Basically, Johnny's asking, is Cody like a real Atlantean, or is he just like pretending to be one? And Cody is a real Atlantean. He is from Atlanta, went to school in Atlanta, has always been very upfront about his Georgia roots. So I would say that yes, that Cody is a colleague, using Johnny's parlance. And then Cam asks, why did I attack Cody Raheem Rhodes? Did the HBCU fan band offend you? So, yeah, after the show, WWE's getting very smart in their new age. So basically, they ran an angle with like Kevin Owens, who's been teasing a heel turn for a while, and is friends with Cody Rhodes, but has really had misgivings about Cody Rhodes like teaming up with Roman Reigns in this match. Confronted him outside of Cody's tour bus, and then attacked him. And they didn't have WWE cameras to record this altercation, because they knew they did it in an area that fans could see, and they knew that fans would record the altercation on their cell phones and post it like TikTok and shit like that and make it go viral, which is exactly what happened. So very, very clever, very smart bit of marketing there by WWE. And
then they don't have to pay the cameraman either.
Well, I mean, the cameramen are already there. It's not like they're shorting somebody because it was at this event. But I just thought that was a very clever way to do it, and like so far that the way that they've approached it, or the way that they've reacted to it, is like they had Triple H put out like a statement that's like, we're going to deal with this issue internally, like that kind of shit. So like they're playing things close to the vest. Raw is tonight. I'll be curious to see. Actually, no, they probably won't reference on Raw because those are both SmackDown guys. So we'll probably have to wait till Friday to see how they're going to officially address it on air. So, but that's the story we're going to lead up to, which is cool. Phil Wanderer asks if John Carpenter's They Live and Christine were side-scrolling action games inspired from elements of Final Fight, Double Dragon, and Super Castlevania, how good could they have been? So first of all, I didn't know Christine was directed by John Carpenter. I was
I
unaware of
didn't
that.
either.
I also don't necessarily know how Christine would make for a good side-scrolling action game, considering it's about like a possessed
Yeah,
car.
yeah,
But
that's a weird one.
but
That being said,
they live. I'm actually surprised they did not make like a side-scrolling beat 'em up in the late
mhm,
'80s, early '90s about They Live, because that would be fucking perfect as a beat 'em up. You could even have a mechanic where you have to like be able to discern between like who are regular people and who are the aliens, as Roddy Piper had to do in the movie. They Live, a really underrated fucking film.
yeah.
More people should watch that if you haven't seen it. It's just a
As far as
it's,
how good could they have been, depends on who was developing it,
yeah.
right? So yeah, I actually haven't seen They Live. I've seen Christine. I don't know how you would adapt Christine as a side scroll.
It's funny because like you could argue they kind of did with like Carmageddon. Like you could say is like Christine like of sorts.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
don't know they would have had the tech back then or the prowess to adopt a good game about a possessed car. So VM asks or says, Carrie, I started SMT5 on Switch and gave up around the halfway mark right after the Fireboss cert. Just picked up Vengeance for the Steam Deck, and I can't put it down with all the quality of life changes and extra content. Just reached the Demon King's castle. And then they ask how hyped we are for Metaphor, which we obviously talked about
Very hype for
so
Metaphor.
far.
Yeah.
What, so
Um,
so is Vengeance really that much of an upgrade over
yeah.
vanilla
Oh yeah.
SMT5? Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of little quality of life updates really make that game a much better experience as Vengeance over the original vanilla. Though, that being said, I thought the original vanilla was also very good. But yeah, Vengeance is great. That's another game I gotta finish. That's on my to-do list as far
Hmm.
as big games to finish. I'm about 2/3 of the way through the canon of Vengeance. And then I kind of want to take a break and then go back and do the original storyline, which I never finished. Yeah, no, it's good. It's a lot of fun. Um, so I'm glad more people are exploring the world of mainline SMT games through the release of Vengeance. SMT5 is good. If you liked SMT5 and you haven't played the Nocturne remaster, please go back and play the Nocturne remaster. It is always on stale. It's that's another thing that runs great on Steam. So yeah, check that out. But yes, as we said, very excited for Metaphor.
Yeah. T-Wash asks, what is something you enjoyed that most people didn't? The first Suicide movie for me because it was a breath of fresh air from watching Batman v Superman.
I don't know.
I tend to like, and this is my fault because when I really like something, I will watch like a bunch of usually content creators around that thing. And those people, because they're playing it, like playing certain games more than literally anybody else should, or more than the average person is going to by a fact by a exponential of like 10, tend to be the most critical about how the games are designed or systems in the
Hmm.
game or what's right or what's wrong about a game, what's works good and what's broken. There are some that strike the balance well, but some forget that like they are in the top 1% of 1% of people that are experiencing that game. So what works best for them is not necessarily going to cater to a mass audience. That being said, basically like Diablo 4 is a great example where Diablo 4 had a lot of criticism from people when it came out. I thought Diablo 4 was fucking great. And I think they've done a great job with several of the seasons that have come since then. And it seems like the expansion is going to continue things. Like when FIFA was out there, like FIFA pros would bitch and complain about this small thing or that small thing about FIFA. I just fucking love the FIFA games. Like those things didn't really fucking bother me because I'm not a no lifer. That's just playing that game is my job. Like I'm playing it a couple hours a day, if that, and just kind of experiencing it. So that's for me is the games that, especially games that have like long tails or that are like live services, that I do really enjoy. But because of the content that I choose to consume, a lot of those games I hear about a lot of criticism about, even though I don't necessarily know that it's warranted all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about games, but I mean, as far as like movies, since what he cited were movies, um, it feels like I liked the Marvels a lot when that came out last year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it feels like no one else really talks about it. To be entirely fair, I think a lot of the reason why that movie didn't do so hot financially is because of the fact that like they couldn't promote it in the same way with the actresses involved due to the strike that was ongoing at the time. Um, and I guess I'll also say that like I guess that '90s show, which
Mm-hmm.
they just canceled at Netflix, which I'm really salty about. I loved that '90s show. It felt like a continuation of that '70s show, which is my favorite like television series ever. So that sucks. So I guess I'll say that '90s show was something that I liked a lot that everybody else I guess was lukewarm on, or at
Yeah.
least everybody at Netflix was lukewarm on. I can't believe they canceled that show. It was so cheap for them to make. It's not like
Oh,
they had big, you know, big A-list actors and actresses involved in there. It was a sitcom, they filmed it weekly. It was a lot of fun. I'm very glad I got to attend a taping of it. Um, but yeah, I don't know.
I'll
Guess
give you
that's
I'll give you another one then. Mass Effect Andromeda is not as
Ah,
bad
yeah.
as people make it out to be. It is arguably the best combat mechanics in any of the Mass Effect games. So even if the story is a bit lacking. And finally, C. Kent says, since I've gotten older, I've started tearing up more during sad moments in media, like games and movies. What are some changes that you have noticed as you have gotten older?
I would say I'm also a little more tender when it comes to certain things in media, and um I think especially like my nostalgia for certain things tends to like cause an emotional reaction in ways that didn't really happen. Mentioned it a couple weeks ago. So I recently produced for a net label called Game Grooves a double album of city pop music that's all rearrangements of Pokemon Gen 2 music. So it's called Goldenrod City Pop. It's available now. You can buy a CD, you can buy cassette tapes, you can buy it digitally. It's also on streaming, so please stream it. Um, and in the process of working on that project, especially as the like tracks were being submitted for mastering and I'm listening to everybody's arrangements and how they chose to interpret the music, I was getting hella tender listening to like some of these older Pokemon tunes that, I would spend a lot of time listening to just like on the cartridge as a kid. So the first time my friend Giaco did an arrangement of the surf theme from that game, and his arrangement is just beautiful. It is spot on for city pop, but like there's so much emotion behind the playing that comes through really well. And yeah, it's like that was one of the tracks where I heard it for the first time and I was like, ugh. Honey Nut Felios on that one. That one and the credits theme in particular were the two where I listened to them for the first time and like I got really misty listening to them. So yeah, I think I'm with you on that in so much that like I'm starting to experience like extremely tender feelings while experiencing media now in my mid 30s in a way that I certainly wasn't 5 or 10 years ago.
So for me, like I've talked plenty on the show how my son is autistic and he has ADHD, and as I observe him, I've noticed a lot of those like ADHD tendencies in myself, and I probably am a little ADHD, like undiagnosed, but I'm pretty sure that I have some of those tendencies, and I think that it's gotten worse as I've gotten older. And so one thing that I've noticed with gaming specifically is that I really don't like a lot of talkie in my games anymore, because I just get so bored and frustrated, like to have the control taken away from me, and I just want to do more things. Now, some games walk the line better than others. The Persona games, believe it or not too bad. Even though there's a lot of talking, it's usually broken up like it's in smaller chunks, right? So there's a lot of it,
Yeah.
but they don't take the controller out of your hands for a long period of time. So like I've gotten on with those. I'll tell you one game that I could probably a game series that would be difficult for me to play now is all the Metal Gear Solid games because of how long a lot of those sequences are. I just can't sit there unless you're giving me like fucking Scorsese level shit. Like I can't just fucking sit there for 30 minutes and watch a cutscene because I want to play the game. Like that's what I want to do. And again, like I think that's a byproduct of the era that we're in with phones and a lot of different attention grabbing things, and that's probably had a negative effect on me, I would say. But yeah, I just can't. I like to do things in games. I don't like to watch things in games as much as I used to back in the day. So, thank you guys very much for your questions. That's going to be a show for us this week. Again, don't forget, if you're not a member of the Discord, go to densepixels.com/fans. You can join and talk with other folks that listen to the shows and with us as well. If you're listening to this in audio format, we do also post a video version on YouTube every week, which you can go check out by going to youtube.com/densepixels. If you're watching on YouTube and it's more convenient to listen to audio podcasts, make sure to find this podcast as well as all the other TNP Studio shows on your podcatcher of choice. And of course, if you are not a premium member, go to densepixels.com/premium for just $5 a month. You get access to all of the TNP premium shows, which basically is the full episode of the Look Forward Political podcast. But if you are a fan or want to learn more about American politics, it is well worth the $5 per month, especially in this election season that we have going on. So that's it for us. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and we will see you all the next time.
See ya.
You're watching the Dense Pixels YouTube channel. Click the subscribe button while you're here, and make sure you check out our weekly podcast where we discuss the latest gaming news and our impressions on what games we've been playing.